I've been leaving the banter at the front too. I think it's good.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Except
If
when
you move
Michael
to
comes,
Queensland,
he's a
what's
fucking
going to happen to
dickhead.
our 12? What's going to happen to our 12-hour tradition, mate?
Come down.
Good.
I'll be the Joey replacement.
You better fucking come down. We're recording.
Yeah.
We're recording.
Oh no, I've sworn.
That's all good.
Sorry,
Won't add that part.
your cookie cutter image has been tarnished.
How's the
Very
little
much.
how's the little student you got at school, mate, that listens to us? Has she been disappointed you haven't been on the last few videos?
I can't even remember who it is, eh?
She's not gonna like the sound of that.
I have to remember who it is. I forgot about her. Well, hopefully she didn't listen to me drop an F-bomb.
You'll be good. You'll be all good, brother. All
All
good
right,
in
let's
the hood.
begin.
Yeah, let's start. All right.
All
So
kind
what
of
is
singing.
this
You got
episode?
limited battery time.
All right, boys. Episode 23 of the Racing Line podcast. And guess what, lads? Racing's back. We've had Supercars over the weekend. We've had MotoGP over the weekend. So we can officially say that the meandering of the preseason is done. And let's start talking about
Just
some
before
racing.
Anthony keeps going, it's episode 24.
Episode 24, even better.
Just a few, gosh.
Almost at the, I think you've been away since episode 19, Mickey.
Yeah.
So welcome back, brother. Welcome back. And it's good to have the official MotoGP correspondent for the podcast back with us tonight. All right, boys, let's jump straight into it. Supercars. We had the Sydney Super Night 600 over the weekend. Joey, let's lead us in. Where would you like to begin, brother?
I wanted to begin with just a quick mention of Brock Feeney before we sort of delve into the heavy hitters of the weekend. I mean, he looked really good, like we said last week about him at Bathurst. He had 2 solid top 10 shootout outings and a top 10 finish, and then finished just outside the top 10. But I think what was more telling was, I think, just the fight he showed, especially in the second race. Like he composure, but he got his shoulders sort of out and had a bit of a bustle with the other fellas who are not giving him an easy time as he's a rookie, and that's going to happen. So I just thought we'd start there, just mention that, because I was
should we start at the
impressed.
beginning, do you reckon, with just the results? So the Saturday results, we'll just go podium. We had Van Gisbergen winning the first race. Second was Anton. It eludes me right now. Anton, and then third was Chaz Mostert for race 1. And then race 2 was a little bit different. We had Chaz Mostert with the win. We had Brody Kostecki coming home second. And then we had ADP again finishing in third.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to look at your notes, Joe, that you
handwritten. Here's where I'll begin quickly then, while you're looking at the notes. So originally what I was interested in for the can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear.
Okay. Loud and clear, my friend.
By the way, nice mic.
Interesting. What I was sort of took me by not by surprise, but I thought it was an interesting observation at the start of the weekend was the teams who performed well at S&P last event. So 4 months ago, all within the top 10 again at the start of this weekend, and the only difference was that Heimgartner was taking Percat's spot. So in terms of teams, the only team that really, I think we could all say took a step back from last weekend, from the last event, was Tickford, because I think
no way they were just as bad last year, man. Really,
were they?
I remember.
Well, I'll tell you this
remember
weekend,
Waters doing better.
I thought at the start of the weekend they were abysmal compared to how the other teams had performed.
Considering last year, like particularly the long race, Waters managed to pull a result because he went on an alternate strategy, if you remember correctly, and he ended up finishing just out of the top 10. But realistically, out of the top 3. But realistically, they struggled last year, and they were talking up a big game on Thursday, particularly Tim Edwards. But then coming into the practice particularly is interesting because Waters was putting a quick time in, every so often, and then by the time everybody cycled through, he was always back down in 15th. And I think he got as high as 9th once. And I was kind of looking at it all weekend saying, we're kind of in a little bit of trouble right now. And
I
it
think
ended
we'll
up being like that.
Leave them for a bit because I've got them in my disappointment section. But that was definitely a bit of a shock. I thought they would have tried something different, sort of just to find a bit of pace. I mean, Walkinshaw was pretty bad last time as well, but they seem to have quite a bit more pace in the dry practice anyway. And then, we'll just talk about Triple Eight because the first race, SGB does a 3-stopper. And he's the only guy to do it, and it was probably, it was the smartest move of them all. But it was so easy, like it came so easy for them. Yeah, it was. And I was going to just mention how we're sort of discussing last week. How do you think Triple Eight would fare with this new shake-up? And even the second race after he had that start of the race blunder to come back to 6th, I think Triple Eight is all well and good. I mean, in terms of how that team works, to get a result from that second race and to pull off even what a strategy that SGB was sort of talking about in the after race press conference, that even he didn't know what the plan was, but he just was trusting in the team, and the result was not even close. I think all in all, they are still really the team to beat. And
I think you're well off with that take, eh?
Why is that?
Because after the first race, I kind of thought all systems go as per usual. But then watching the second race, you cannot claim that Van Gisbergen's drive back to 6th was by design. I mean, they got very lucky in the last 20 laps of the race that they had 3 safety cars and he was able to get back on the lead lap.
Yeah, it was fortuitous.
He made a mistake. They brought him in. They put him on the wrong tires. He made another mistake. That was a mistake. He came back in. He went 1.8 laps down. He was mired in 16th, 17th, and 18th for the whole race. Got his lap back with 15 laps or so to go, and then had 2 more safety cars that really, really assisted him in that. That was, I would say that had nothing to do with clever design by Triple Eight.
Dude, you just made my point for me.
Yeah, but he still had to put himself in
6th.
those positions, mate.
He still has to make the passes.
With all due respect, if he's on the lead lap and he's making it through, like he should be making it through the field with that car.
Yeah, I agree.
But if I was to tell you 15 laps into that race, Giza is 1.5 laps down, and then at the end of the race he came 6th, you would be like, wow, what happened? I mean, they can do is play the cards that they're dealt. And
but
they
someone who didn't watch the race might think that Triple Eight pulled it out of the bag for him, but the reality wasn't. The reality was just the circumstance very much helped him in that regard, and it had nothing to do with clever. There was nothing that Triple Eight did after their mistake that helped him get back through. He got lucky. He got a wave by, and then those last two safety cars really helped him, and a lot of people at the end vying for positions, taking each other out.
Do you think? Because on Saturday, obviously their strategy was so much better than Dick Johnson's and everyone else's. Do you think they got complacent on Sunday with their strategy calls?
I think their race was dictated, number one, by the stuffed up qualifying. They didn't get into the top 10. And then Shane's mistake going off definitely
exacerbated.
It made it worse. And then talking about the pit stop, they made that pit stop because he went off. So the rain started and they thought, well, we can mitigate some of the time lost by taking our pit now. And then in hindsight, it was a bad mistake because the rain was nothing more than a splash. But I beg to differ.
In hindsight, it was also a
Nev.
bad mistake because most of the top drivers didn't make that decision.
Yeah, and I'm not disputing that. But what I'm saying is that in terms of how far they fell in that race to come back and get 6th, I think is
okay.
So where did Feeney finish? Where did Feeney finish again? I can't remember.
11th or 12th.
Yeah, so still a really good result considering.
It was crazy that he that he finished behind SVG, I thought, to be honest.
Joe, for you to come out of this season, for you to come out of this race week and say that Triple Eight are all systems go as they were last. I know it's only one race meet, but for you to say it's all systems go, that is so far from fact.
All right, we'll
they
beg to
had
differ.
a lot of mistakes in the race. They made a lot of mistakes in qualifying, they got a little bit lucky, and they've got a really good racer, and he was able to spare some of those blushes as well. But they are not all systems go right
What did
now.
you think, H, of that
In
second
terms
race?
of in the second race, I think
Like
it
in
was.
terms of damage limitation, were you impressed or were you?
I can see both sides here. He was fortuitous in the fact that there was a lot of incidents on track that caused safety cars. But I still think same as Lewis at Brazil last year. In Formula One, he still has to make the passes. He still has to put himself into those positions to actually make the moves up the field.
My point is that these are the results that define championships. How bad are your worst days, or how good are your worst days?
Your point was that they were all systems go. That's what you said.
Yeah, I think that all systems go. To resurrect that finish, I think all systems go.
I'm not debating the quality of the driver to come back through the field if he's given a sniff. I'm not debating that. The point I'm trying to make is they made mistakes all weekend, and he spared their blushes.
I'm a bit looking at it this weekend. I don't know how Feeney's going to be as a second driver, because the other teams around them have got some pretty strong drivers on both sides of the garage, and I don't know if he's going to push them to the championship, the constructors.
We'll get to that. I've put that in these notes. We'll get to that, but that is an interesting question we're going to come to. All right. So then my next thing was just that the teams and drivers I thought put in a good showing, and I was pleasantly surprised with glimpses from these people. First one, Andre Heimgartner, new team, new car, and gets into the top 10 on Saturday, has a good race, and really the team let him down in terms of he had to do a final pit stop because he was going to run out of fuel. And that took away, I think, his top 6 finish or whatever it was. But I think all in all, we saw that number one, he's not the number one driver in that team like we expected. And I think I don't know if
Forward was actually pretty good, but I was quite pleasantly surprised with Forward too.
Forward was also in my pleasant surprises. I thought he had showed a lot of fight, but I just think in terms of experience and where Heimgartner is in his career, you would expect him to be top dog. And I think he showed that this weekend, even with in the second race when he started from the back of SGV, I thought he showed a lot of composure and stayed clean. Then my second pleasant surprise was Tim Slade. I mean, 2 top 10 finishes. I'd like to know what you guys think of BRT's performance, because I mean, it's a small team. I think it's the only one car team on the grid now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to come away with 2 top 10s and show genuine pace throughout the weekend, I think the envy of a lot of the mid-table pack. 100%.
They shot themselves in the foot in the first race. They started up really good, and I think Slade had a poor start, and then they botched one of his pit stops as well. And to make a top 10 out of that result shows the true pace of the car. But I mean, we always talk about the eye test, but even just watching the eye test over the week, the car looked fast and he was very competitive throughout. So they definitely have a lot of things going for them. And right now, it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to say that is the second best Ford team out there, even though it's one car.
The second best Ford team.
I think they're performing better than Tickford.
I wouldn't put it there, because I think Waters is definitely the number one, the number 3 Ford car on the grid, to be honest.
Yeah, could that be track specific though, Anthony?
I think that Waters is doing a whole lot to spare that team's blushes right now.
Dude,
to be honest,
Courtney looked pretty decent this weekend as well, to be honest. If we're going to speak truthfully, top 10, and then his strategy was sort of stuffed up in the second race, but he definitely showed genuine pace. Yeah, I mean, I think especially for Tickford, we know that they're absolute trash at SMP, so I don't want to jump the gun too much on them. But
I think as a team, they're struggling a little bit. They're definitely, I don't know, we can talk about this later. They definitely have been surpassed by Walkinshaw over the last 6 months as the third best team in the grid.
100%.
I think we can say. But,
100%.
Pretty obvious. So,
what about Matt Stone Racing? Were you impressed by them?
I was very impressed with Matt Stone Racing, to be honest. I was impressed also with the drivers.
Yeah.
Because, I think LeBrock hadn't done a whole lot at Tickford to prove that he really deserved a seat. And I think that Hazelwood, we always know that he's quick, but his consistency can be lacking at times. But both of them came out this year or this weekend, and they were both really competitive.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, there's a lot of talk about them bringing in new engineering help. Definitely looks like they've maximized the most from the 888 package as well, and it's good to see. There's a lot of effort that's gone into it. It looks like there's a lot of, you know, money that's gone into that team as well, and they're there or thereabouts. They took the gamble with LeBrock at the end of the race. It didn't really pay off. I don't think it was ever really going to pay off, but it was good to see them push for it. And I think they just need to get a little bit more consistent. But as a first showing for the kind of the new iteration of the team, it was really good to see. And
I
it
felt
shows
a
that
bit
they're
sorry
building.
for LeBrock, to be honest.
Yeah,
I feel like
don't know if
the team should have saved him from
himself.
Well, not from himself, because he was carrying out the team's strategy, and as a team they chanced it. But it got to a point when I was like, man, there's no way you can stay on this track with slicks, like especially a track like that with so much sort of corner time.
But by the time you've done it for that long, but like you kind of have to commit, because otherwise you're just gonna come out last anyway. You know what I mean?
What were they saying on commentary? Is it 80% of the lap or something? Is you turning?
Yeah, something like that.
I think
Something
each
like
corner on
70%.
average is. I think each corner on average is like 7 seconds of corner,
turning. Yeah.
which is insane. So they were sort of my pleasant surprises. And then we'll go to the teams I sort of was disappointed in. And number one was Team 18. I mean, I never saw like a moment of, they're sort of on, but it wasn't even
in the middle of race 2.
It wasn't that. It was
really
like,
well.
But like in terms of race 1, they have the hose problem on Spy's car, and then
He was pretty annoyed at that too, because apparently it happened last year a lot.
Yeah, but this one they were saying was it was instigated by contact between him and another car. And then race 2, Scott Pye actually was the one who looked the pacier as well. Like I do think he's the quicker of the two of them, like in the last 6 months especially. And then he had that tangle up with Percat, which at first I didn't see it, but I watched it back. And Anton told me it was Percat's fault. I don't think it was, to be honest, man. Because Percat came up the inside clean. And I mean, I don't know why he's turned in on him when the car's on his inside, but stuffed up my boy's race.
It was Percat's fault. That was Percat's fault.
No way. Did you watch it back? Anyway, okay,
I watched it.
I beg to differ. It was a racing incident. But in general, I just thought that team had a bad weekend. And in terms of the way they started championship, it was probably one of the worst weekends they've had in a little while. And then Tickford, like you can go into Tickford a bit more than me.
Before going into Tickford, but the thing that is so frustrating about Team 18 is that we always see the team's potential, like they always have potential, and we're always, I'm always waiting for them to, like I'm always saying, when are they going to put it together? Like surely they're learning from these mistakes and they're eventually going to put it together and kind of put a run together. And I think that it can happen, but the problem is we don't see it enough. We're always waiting and expecting them to come good. And like with the investment they put in the team, the drivers they've got, the engineering they have, they really should be performing better than they are. And they just haven't at this stage been able to put everything together. And the problem is this is their 4th year now. So they really should be putting it together by now. Particularly with the talent they have.
What do you think stopping them from putting it together?
One thing
Just
I think
these little mistakes.
One thing I think with Team 18, it's a lot of the teams. Like, so these were 300k races. So the scope for strategy was like it was wide. Like you could try something different, think out of the box, and it's not like you have to do it all the time. But Team 18 have come up with a few pretty good strategies in the past, especially to get their drivers up the front in these longer races, and to see them sort of stick to the norm, like the conventional strategy, when taking an early pit stop and then giving your driver clean air bears so much dividends for Shane. Like splitting up your strategy and running one car to sort of that strategy in a race, just to see how it goes, like stuff like that. I just think they really, a lot of the little teams, but them especially, miss the mark, because when we see so much pace and 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 good moments that they never seem to capitalize on. And like I think that this weekend was another weekend of that. Like it was it's like they're always full of empty promises. They can't get out of their own way. And I don't like being too critical of them, because I like their drivers and I like their owner and I like the team. But yeah, I just thought they were, out of all the teams this weekend that I would have expected a little bit more from, I thought I would have liked to see a bit more from them. Yeah, and then I think the same thing with Tickford. Like I didn't expect them to come and have a rocket ship, but I expected a little bit more. And I think one thing that it could be down to is they've got one rookie driver and one young driver, and then Courtney and Waters. But
do you know what I was thinking of this week with Tickford? That
I'll mention this quickly before you go. I felt like this weekend especially, they were just relying on the brilliance of Cam to race through from the back and hoping on some rain. Did you get that vibe?
I know they were definitely hoping on the rain, because they realized that they didn't have the pace very early on. But something that is interesting to consider is that, particularly over the last few years, Tickford haven't really invested in any engineers, people coming in from externally. So I think they might be victims of their own past success, and they're kind of a little bit of the McLaren syndrome, in the sense that they were, one of the most professional, most competitive teams for so long, and they still kind of expect to be there, and they're not there. And they kind of, I don't know if they're too proud, in the sense that they aren't willing to do everything that's necessary to get back to the top. And I think, like, if you think about WAU, it was very similar to them. They were, in the past, they were sitting on their past, successes, and that was probably, jading them in their ability to move forward. And it only was when they had a long, hard look and said, we're not where we need to be. We need to bring in some external people to give this, team a bit of a shake-up. And that's when the changes started being made. Because the reality is, they've got a driver who should be fighting for championships who isn't. And they still they managed to sign him to a contract for the next 2 years. But if the team keeps, failing to deliver on these empty promises, then he's going to go win a championship with Triple Eight. And that's the reality of it. They've got a driver that should be winning championships. He's, like, even this weekend, the fact that he was able to finish in 4th with that car is phenomenal. Like,
Is Cam Waters you're talking about?
Yeah, he's an absolute gun.
That's something as well, if you think about it.
Yeah. Chaz did the same thing for them.
He's going to become the new Chaz, because Chaz was one of the best drivers in the comp for them, who has not enough wins to his tally. Like when even he says it himself. And then the way that they managed the whole Cam and Chaz debacle, like ended up becoming a debacle, was subpar, and everyone can see that. And the second that Chaz came into WAU, he has performed better than expected. But in terms of, imagine if they had kept him there. Number one, they would still have probably 2 of the best younger drivers in the comp. But like they would be able to challenge each other. And I
don't know if they could have kept him there, because I think he was ready for another. Like, think about Mostert was at Tickford and they were underperformed. Well, the other problem Tickford have is that they've had the luxury of these 2 drivers, Mostert and now Waters, who perform better than the car does, or better than the car should. So that there's probably a misconception within the team that they're closer to the top when they are. When the reality is that the 2 people that are driving for them, or that were driving for them, were pulling out results that they really shouldn't have been getting. Yeah. So until they have a good hard look at where they're at, and the fact that they are failing, and they are, because they're getting worse year on year. I mean, if you think about 2 years ago, the second half of the season, Cam Waters came light, nearly won the Bathurst 1000. The team was looking really strong. Last year, there was all this build up to how good they were going to perform. They, didn't do so well, and started off this year in the same way. So listen, it might be track specific, but they've had 3 runs at Sydney Motorsport Park in the last 3 years, and they haven't got any better.
between last year and this
I mean,
year.
sorry, yeah, season on season. I mean, there you go. It's even worse than it looks. So something is definitely amiss.
The other thing as well, I think, is that their driver lineup, like for 4 cars, has become weaker and weaker. Like there's no denying that. Like there was a time when it was Winterbottom, Davidson, Reynolds, right? And all 3 of those cars had a chance of winning the championship at one stage, not just winning races. And now you've got Waters, who's title contender. We'll put it in quotations because he is. And then you've got Courtney, who's feasible. He's good, but he's at 41. Then you got Randall, who's a rookie, who needs a year to learn.
Yeah, but
put a
see,
season together. But then you go sign Jake Kostecki, who I've got nothing against. But in terms of
he's done nothing to warrant that.
He's done nothing
to
take a Tickford drive. Like this is a Tickford drive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the other thing you got to think about is Tickford always have 2 guns. I think obviously Waters is undebatably the leader. They have always brought a young driver in to their top team when they were undeveloped. So Chaz Mostert, they brought in straight from 1 season in Dick Johnson Racing. He wasn't ready. They brought him in and then he matured at the team. They did the same thing to Cam Waters. He won Super 2. They brought him in probably a little bit greener than he needed to be, and he's turned out to be a great racer. And the same thing with Tom Randall. He won Super 2 with them. He's really done everything he can at every other level to warrant a place in Supercars. And I have total confidence that he will be a top racer. So I have no issue with them bringing Randall in. I have no issue with them keeping Courtney for hopefully his last season, because he's getting a little bit long in the tooth. But I did not see the Kostecki move, with any real care, I should say. I felt like they could probably get a better driver than that. And you know what? There was better drivers on the market. There was Heimgartner, even someone like Holdsworth. But I
Fabian?
guess Coulthard, yeah. Well, yeah.
That's different.
It's not really the Tickford way. Tickford always traditionally bring in younger drivers. So we'll see how that pans out. But they're definitely slipping.
Yeah. And all right, let's talk about the big boys and the big talking points. WAE, I was impressed. I don't want to blow their trumpet too early because I feel it could have been weather specific as well. But
get a P3 on race 1 though, and it was dry.
P3 and P6 on race 1. Percat came up through the back. I thought it was a strong showing for them. I mean, here's the other thing though: they're always really good on longer races, like you have a bit more time to sort of flex some strategy. And then race 2, P1 and P20, P19 for Nick. What did you guys think of WAU this weekend?
I think you're underselling him. How you can say that Triple Eight was hitting on all cylinders, but WAU might be track specific. I think WAU were awesome this weekend.
I don't want to hype them up because I don't want to give them bad juju.
You should hype them up.
I want you guys to hype them up for me.
It's all right, boys. Chaz has got blue hair. It's staying.
You should hype them up, I think, because the reality is, Chaz put the car on. I'm talking about Sunday. Saturday, it was kind of the Van Gisbergen show, and Chaz, that was a damage limitation race. He did the best he could in that race, and he did a good job. Got a podium. On the Sunday, put it on pole. Got really unlucky with when the weather came out on his flying lap for the shootout. Dropped him to 7th, and he was still able to come out and comfortably, get to the front of the race by the second pit stop. And in the wet, he looked like an absolute machine. So they did.
One thing I want to mention quickly before we keep going, just because I think it needs to be said, talking about the strategy. Before you keep going, they made the decision to bring Chaz and Nick in together to fill up on that first was it on the first or second safety car?
Yeah, and I noticed that.
And that pretty much meant that when they did their last pit stop on the super softs, there was no fuel time. They were full. They just did tires and were gone.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of strategy moves.
And Erebus did a really quick fill in that second pit stop so that they could stay in front of ADP, and they stayed in front of him. But then obviously that hampered them dramatically going into the now. Every team is trying to make the best decisions for them. Like we're not kind of here to say that they've made the wrong decision. But in hindsight, everything that Walkinshaw did over the course of the weekend was really good. And if Percat didn't, crash out and he finished at the back of the top 10, even for him, you would consider that a good week considering it was his first race meeting with the team. So they got a really strong lineup. I think they're really, looking quite potent at this particular point in time. And I don't think it's too much of a stretch. We'll see how consistent Feeney is over the course of the year, but I wouldn't see it as too much of a stretch if they were, definitely in the mix for the Constructors' Championship come the end of the season.
Yeah. About you, H?
Yeah, I was impressed. And even Chaz's start in the first race, he made up a couple of spots.
Yeah.
It was just, I think he was just on it all weekend.
I feel like as a team that they've definitely got some belief behind them now. Like they're sort of feeling themselves, but like in the way that you want them to. Like they've got confidence in their actions.
They should be feeling themselves a little bit. They should have a bit of momentum.
It'll be interesting to see what happens at the next track.
Well, we'll talk about that soon as well, because I've sort of taken some things down about that. And then Dick Johnson Racing, what do you think about that? Anton looked pretty good this weekend. He's definitely started the year better than he did last year. Like he's on the money straight away.
His drift game's off.
I think I think I mentioned it last week. He was really strong last year at Sydney Motorsport Park. So again, is that specific to Sydney Motorsport Park, or are they going to be strong across the board, or is he going to be strong across the board?
I think especially last year, Anton was strong for the second half of the season. Like I remember thinking, if this guy started the season well, he would be in the championship hunt or much higher up than he ended up finishing. And yes, they were good at SMP, but I think now with I think him and Ludo have made a good connection. I do think he's the real deal this year with Dick Johnson Racing as well. So
the only thing that I have with Di Pasquale is that I think that he's a bit of a win from the lead kind of guy. So he'll win if he's up the front and he won't make a mistake and he's really quick. But I don't know if he moves through the field as surgically as some of the other, guys that we perceive at the top yet. That's the only thing that wouldn't fill me with confidence about.
He's younger than all the other ones.
He is, but he's in a car that should be like, if he's racing for the top team or a top team, then regardless of your age, there's an expectation that you're going to perform. And he's been racing for long enough.
Their strategy did let them down in race one, though, because he was either first or second. I remember it was him and can't remember who was up top with him. But then SVG just powered through in the last 10 laps because of their fuel strategy.
I think SGV's strategy was better than everyone's. Like in terms of him, he finished better than the rest.
But that's what I mean. Like you can't really blame Anton for that.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I wasn't really thinking about that. I was thinking more of when he is behind. So, for example, he was behind Kostecki for a while, and he should have made much a lot of work. Oh, I don't know actually, because he was on worse tires, and he did a pretty good job staying there.
What do you think of Erebus then? We'll go straight to there because
they performed well. They made a mistake with Will Brown, missing that pit during that third safety car, I think it was. But apart from that, and obviously Will Brown's qualifying on the Sunday, they look good. They look really good. They look strong. I think they've got a bit of moxie back in that team, which is good to see. There's definitely confidence in the driver lineup they have and their newfound kind of, financial situation, in the sense that they've got a big backer and they kind of feel a bit more established in that again. So I'm pretty impressed with where they're at.
Do you think
Kostecki was good all weekend?
Dude, Kostecki was the one I was sort of not worried about, but he's the one I want to see more from.
Yeah.
Because we know what Brown is. But after this weekend, I'm like, I think they're both fine. I mean, it was a bit track specific. Like they were really good at SMP last year, so I want to see them at every other track. But I was thinking, I wonder if this team can get amongst it in the middle with Walkinshaw and Tickford, or especially I was wondering if you reckon they could take on from Tickford?
I don't know. They're probably going to be just as inconsistent as Tickford. The only thing that they'll be just as inconsistent, I think, but the only thing that I would give Tickford the advantage over, and maybe it's not even Tickford, but it's probably more Cam Waters. I think that they might have the advantage purely because Waters is, in an echelon above Brown and Kostecki.
Yeah.
But in relation to maybe the team's championship, it will probably be a lot closer than we expect because there's definitely a lot more consistency between those two than with some of the younger drivers that are there. H, you said that you had an apology to give me tonight, and I'm really itching to hear what it is.
Well, I've been giving you a lot of shit about your helmet takes about the visor and the not visor. I'm with you, mate. The little shitty visor, I don't like it.
Yeah, there you go.
SVG's got the full visor, and it looks so much better than, say, Chaz's helmet that's got that little thing on it. Yeah, I was like, nah, I get it now. So I do apologize for giving you shit for that all that time.
Yeah, it's good to see that you're coming over to the lighter, because you know what, I'm not going to harp on about it for too much, but I was watching it again this week, and there's some bloody nice helmets. And then I look at these stupid visors, these peaks that they've got on them. I'm like, you've got this beautiful thing there, that beautiful lid, and you just make it look like an absolute piece of crap. Even Brock Feeney, right?
It doesn't look right.
Anyway, we're turning into bloody British supercars.
Let's end like
crying shame.
They don't need them. Let's end like this.
Shame.
Let's end like this. We've got 18 days to round 2, which is the Tasmania Super Sprint.
Yeah.
And this has been historically a Triple Eight stomping ground.
Yeah.
Right. And I was looking at the stats from last year: Triple Eight 1-2, Triple Eight 1-2, race 1 and 2. And then it was weird. Like after that, it was Mostert, Waters, Brown, Davidson, all jumbled up in both races after that. So I'm interested to see, especially after next week, if number one, another team can supplant Triple Eight at Tasmania, and then if we see a pattern in terms of how each team finishes, if we can get some regularity in the pecking order of teams, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, a bit more consistency.
Yeah, I think we'll leave it there for Supercars.
And you know what? We won't have too long. We've got just under 3 weeks to wait, so that's a good thing. All right, moving right along then, because we're only halfway through the pod for this weekend, and we had an absolute zinger of a MotoGP race this weekend. An absolute zinger, boys. And if you watched it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We opened the MotoGP season in Losail this weekend in Qatar, and it was everything that we weren't expecting from the first round of the championship. We've been talking about Ducati and how
Suzuki.
well they've been. We've been talking about Fabio Quartararo, the world champion, and the rider he's turned out to be. And then this weekend threw up an absolute umbrella of a result. And, Honda was looking really strong. Suzuki looked really strong in practice. And then we got to the race, and boy, it was an interesting race. So, Mick, I'm going to keep you to 3 minutes to try to give me a synopsis of the race.
No hot takes, mate, just the synopsis.
Yeah, look, I don't really. Someone else can give the synopsis if they wish, because I've got some points of discussion afterwards.
I'll quickly just.
So I'll let someone else.
I'll give you a second. So qualifying was interesting. Jorge Martin from first. I can't remember who was second, to be perfectly honest with you, but it was Martin. Marc Márquez was in third. Quartararo and Bagnaia were mired in the back of the top 10. Paul Espargaró looked very strong for Honda as well.
Wasn't he second?
Pretty sure he was second, yeah.
Paul was second.
He started from sixth.
Did he?
Yep. Can't remember who was second, to be honest with you. But we got into the start of the race.
Rins.
No.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. I can't remember.
Or 10th.
Coming out of the first corner, the two Hondas were number 1 and 2. They had
Miller.
No, Miller was fourth.
Doesn't matter. They had Bastianini behind. Brad Binder had an amazing start.
Oh, Bastianini was second.
Well, there you go. That makes sense.
Actually, yeah.
So they had a great start. Honda looked really strong throughout the whole race. I mean, Paul Espargaró pretty much led the race till the last, till the last few laps. Bastianini and Binder were keeping him honest the whole time, and Márquez went from second to fourth, and then he kind of got mired in a battle with the Suzukis, and that might have affected him. Interestingly, throughout the whole race, there was conversation about Honda and their decision to go to a soft rear tyre, which is interesting for them. and whether they could hold on to it. And then towards the end of the race, it became pretty obvious that they chewed up too much of it. And, it was pretty light work for Bastianini and Binder to get past Espargaró.
Paul made a mistake as well.
He did, but the tyre was
let's
definitely going
let's
off.
just get the race summarized.
This guy's been asleep for an hour, and now he's
Exactly. I've been waiting for you guys.
He's dropping Putin bombs.
So, welcome back, Michael.
Yeah, that's it. So the race ended up top three. We had Enea Bastianini taking the win for Gresini. Quite an emotional win considering they just lost their founder 6 months ago, and it was good to see Fausto Gresini's misses, at the race, and it was very emotional. But he got his first win on a 2021 spec Ducati, which was amazing. Brad Binder, we've been talking about how well he's performed in second halves of races for the last 6 months, and it's good to see what he could do when he was up the front for the whole race. And even though they didn't win, with Márquez and Espargaró finishing third and Márquez in fifth, Honda do look pretty good considering it's not one of their best tracks. So
Dude, that is an amazing result that Pole beat Márquez in a race like that. You wouldn't really expect him to do it at. It shows that the bike is actually a bit more suited to him.
I think we can talk about this a little bit later on, but I think there's definitely a conversation about whether Márquez's injuries over the last 2 years has forced Honda to develop a better ergonomic bike. So there's something there, definitely.
Definitely
Mickey.
has. Go Casville.
All right, how you going, guys? It's good to be back. It's been a while.
So much.
His face looks like he's got so much to get off his chest too. Look at him.
I've got a few points. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but there's a few
Like
things.
we're going to listen to a vegan homily right now. Not going to get a word in.
There's a few things that stand out to me, and that I've been jotting down over the weekend since FP1. What I found interesting after Q2 and the grid, looking at the grid before the race, is if you had asked me before the race who are the top 12 riders, in the paddock in 2022, it would have been the 12 that were in the top 12. Now, the order was a little bit surprising to say the least, but they would be my top 12 riders of 2022. And the race, I think, was fantastic. I mean, there was a little bit of everything. But even before the race, I was telling you guys after watching the first practice session, I could see, and I'll start off with Suzuki, I could see that there was pace. Now, I had to endure a lot of bullshit last year. A lot of comments that were made that I did flag at the start of the season when I said that the Suzuki bike last year would be weak.
Like you've been holding on to this.
That proved to be correct. Yamaha made strides last year, and so did Ducati, and we saw a 2-horse race for all of last year.
I did also for a second, Mike.
I did also mention. Nah, you can wait.
Just 1 second,
I did also
Mike. 1
mention
second.
that
It's a joke.
the 2022 Suzuki bike would be much improved because it's something that's been being worked on since well before the engine freeze, and we saw that. I don't know how they've done it, but they've managed to produce a bike this year with significantly improved horsepower. So much improved, in fact, that it can match Ducati's down one of the longest straights in the World Championship, which, to be honest, blew my mind in free practice. I also noticed that Honda have also increased their horsepower, which was from already a pretty fast bike. KTM, we know, have speed. Aprilia also, we know, have speed. So realistically, we're looking at about 5 manufacturers now that have some pretty impressive top end speed. But
Nick, do you reckon it's overall horsepower, or it's even the fact that they're able to get better delivery out of the corners and acceleration like the Ducati?
I think like Suzuki came out and said straight away before testing they've increased minimum at least 13 kilometers per hour of horsepower. Now, I still did not expect them to match a Ducati down that long straight. Now, watching the race and watching practice, they were comfortably matching the Ducatis, and there was a part of the race too where Mir burnt past. It was either an Aprilia or
That was a
or-
Ducati.
actually it was a Yamaha, which doesn't surprise me at all. But I was significantly impressed because last year I remember watching Miller burn Mir down the back straight twice in the race, and it wasn't a contest. So to see so many manufacturers, like I said, Suzuki, Honda, KTM, and Aprilia matching, or at least being competitive with the Ducatis, I think is fantastic for the year ahead. And considering this is a track where last year Yamaha won both races by a country mile, and Ducati was so dominant in one lap pace, does it surprise me that a Ducati won in the end? No, it doesn't. Does the rider who won surprise me? Yeah, no, it doesn't to an extent, but
doesn't really.
extremely happy. But yeah, in terms of overall pace, I think it's going to be an absolutely brilliant season.
One thing that I think is interesting from this race, especially was, or not even this race, from testing as well. Suzuki is still running the inline four, and that's something that they want to run, and that's something that Yamaha have also stated that they will not change. But the whole thing about the inline four has been is Honda went to a V4 because they said we can't get the horsepower to match the Ducatis and the Aprilias and the KTMs with their V4 configuration. So we're going to with their V4, so we're going to go to a V4 also. And Yamaha have been struggling really badly with horsepower and acceleration, but they're saying no, we're going to stick to our roots and stick to our inline four. And a lot of people say that's because they want to maintain their Yamaha sound. But like in terms of the whole sort of engine power, they're lacking a lot. So for Suzuki to come with a evolution of their engine and get the same amount of power, not same amount, like the equivalent power that they need to compete with the V4s, is number one, is applaudable. But also I'm just thinking to myself, what the hell have Yamaha been doing that Suzuki have done this with the smallest budget on the grid, and Yamaha there with, you know, supposed their four factory bikes, and they got their finger in their butt doing nothing.
Well,
and I suppose we'll come to that later.
Yeah, I had the same thoughts, to be honest. You think about Yamaha and you think about the wealth of resources that they have, and obviously such a historically competitive, historically successful brand, company, factory, whatever you want to call it. I struggle to understand how their bike has been so inconsistent, you could say, over the past 3 or 4 years. I mean, they are inline four, and if you look at the two inline four bikes in the paddock, you could make the point that Yamaha and Suzuki are definitely the most efficient on tire wear. However, last year we saw Ducati make massive strides with producing a bike that looked after the tires, but also kept that phenomenal speed. And we'll get to it later, but you can see the benefit that had with Pecco last year. Like I was saying all of last year, remember Pecco in 2020 falling off the bike at nearly every race. Last year comes and just misses out on the title. So Ducati fixed the tire wear, and that prompted, I think, Suzuki to say, okay, they're getting close to us on tire wear. We need to fix up our speed. And all of through winter testing, they were saying wind tunnel work. So yes, Anthony, to go back to your point, I think a lot of it is aero as well. But to get those extra ponies out of the new engine is fantastic. Just to move away from Suzuki though, I think Ducati, in all, despite the fact that they won, kudos to Gresini. I think it's a phenomenal win. I actually think Ducati factory and Pramac were actually pretty disappointing. Obviously, Martin didn't have much control over what happened, but Pecco fell, I think, twice in practice, and then he obviously fell in the race. Very ordinary start. Miller did a Miller. Even before his electronics problems, he dropped back with Pecco about 4 spots just off the start, and he wasn't going anywhere fast. So
I've got some information for you though, just about this.
I will say, and I called this last year too, you've got 2 absolute superstars coming through the stable in Ducati. I think Enea is my pick. I think if he starts the year the way if he continues to start the year the way he started this race and the way he finished last season on the 2020 bike, which was which was junk. I think, we could have him signed up for the works team before halfway through the season. I don't think that's out of the question. One of the things that I also noticed was how impressive Brad Binder was. I think that KTM I don't think the KTM can quite match, say, the Ducati and now the Suzuki down the straight, or even the Honda. But the way that he rode from start to finish was phenomenal. There were moments in that race where it looked like he was about to get overrun. He kept the bike consistent. He managed his tires beautifully. I think it was an unbelievable race.
If I can just interject for a second, Mick, the amazing thing about Brad Binder, particularly with the limitations of the KTM, because they definitely do have limitations compared to everybody else, is that his ability to keep the tire grippy for the whole race is phenomenal. So even though he doesn't have the outright performance of the bike, and we saw this last year, as everybody starts to taper at the end of the races, he was able to make, really good ground. And if he's able to get a little bit more out of the bike in qualifying, so he's starting in, the top 10 as opposed to 15th, 16th, then come the end of the race, as he manages his tire so well, then rather than finishing 6th, we're going to see a lot more back of the podium positions and, a lot more competitive results, because that's definitely a really good trait that he has.
I think it's a good point. However, I do think KTM still have a problem on circuits that require a soft tire. All through testing, they were weak, especially at Mandalika. They can't seem to find a setup for their bikes on a soft compound, which they're going to need, considering there are a lot of tracks that will suit the softer compound. However, whenever they have a medium compound, and the point is continuously made in commentary last year, but also in LaSalle, they do well on medium compound tracks. However, I think a lot of the ride yesterday was down to Brad. He did conserve the tires beautifully, and also you can't escape the fact that Pole made a huge error late in the race, because Pole actually managed his worsening tires as well. Yamaha were nowhere. They're like Joe's already said. I can't seem to wrap my head around it. You saw Quartararo, world champion, across the line shaking his head. I don't think that's a good sign at all. I think he's been upset since the first test. They need to sort that out very quickly. Morbidelli was gone. I expected a decent race by Morbidelli. Again, it's the first race of the season, but considering Yamaha won both these races last year, I expected way more.
That's what I was going to mention. I was going to say Yamaha won both races last year at the same track, and then to see them cross the line 9th and 11th, I think it was, and thinking about it, if the 3 Ducatis hadn't come off from whatever that, they could have been in 12th and 15th. Like your number one factory rider, the current world champion, finishing in 12th at a race he won a year ago. That shows, number one, how big the step everyone else has made, or the lack of step that Yamaha has made. I mean, I don't think he's going to resign for them.
I have to ask you a question, boys.
I think, can I just say one thing too? I honestly think for Yamaha, losing the funding that the Petronas satellite team used to give them is a massive loss, because you could, 2 years ago, they were the premier satellite team in the class. I think Pramac, and now, if this race is an indication, Gresini look legit this season. Again, first race of the season, we don't know, but losing that funding that Petronas was able to give them, and also they had a bit of a stable going on 2 years ago. That talent pool seems to be pretty much dried up now. I think they're in a bit of bother, and I'm not expecting much. That, based on the horsepower game that I saw today or saw last night, I honestly am not expecting much until we get to some circuits that are not going to be dominated by pace, and the way the competition is now. Like I said, you've got 12 riders now that are so close. Little margins are making the difference. Now, there's a few points that I'd like to throw to you guys. I personally think, if this race is an indication of anything, I think you got a 3-horse race for the constructors. Again, I'm not 100% sold yet on KTM and Aprilia. I think I need to see more, because Aprilia does well at Qatar. However, still a very impressive race by Aleix. I think we've got a Ducati, Honda, Suzuki 3-way battle brewing. What do you guys think? Do you guys agree? Another thing that I would like to point out, I've already kind of touched on it, is that Enea, Enea looks brilliant. I think there are 3 tyre preservation experts in this competition, and I'd say that Mir's already proved he is one. I think Binder last year showed signs, but I think Enea on a pretty ordinary Ducati showed fantastic promise last year, and he's done it again. He's done it again this year. So
he's riding the
what do you think
2022 He's riding the 2021 Ducati this year. So
he's
got
riding,
a really
he's riding a
good.
2021 Ducati this year, but he was doing well on a 2020 Ducati the year before, which had nothing. So what are your thoughts on Bastianini? Do you think he'll be the works rider ahead of Martin? Because I really have no faith in Miller. I think he's gone.
I got one
and
issue.
my last thing that I'd like to say before I throw it to you guys is Suzuki had 3 big wins this off season. All right. They didn't have a race team director last year, which I think hurt them even more. Okay, they lost Davide Brivio the year after they win the World Championship. He goes to F1. They don't replace him. They decide to do some committee approach. The bike was weaker. That hurt them. They signed Livio Suppo, who has won 2 World Championships with 2 different constructors. I think that's a massive win for them. They've obviously increased the horsepower, and the cornering stays the same. If they re-sign Mir, I think it's a massive win for Suzuki coming out of an off-season where Mir was even, commentators were saying he was considering leaving. So what are your thoughts on the 3-horse race, Bastianini? And again, considering all of the garbage that was thrown around about Suzuki last year, what are our opinions on Suzuki?
Can I start with Ducati quickly?
Yeah.
All right. So firstly,
quick joke, because we've had monologues for the last 20 minutes.
All right. So Jack Miller, for all who want to know, had a electronics problem, which was registering his bike on different corners on the GPS. So when he was going down the front straight, his throttle was like the limiter. So the sensitivity of the throttle wasn't registering on the right corner. So on down the straights, he was having the setting that was supposed to be on the long corners, and it was not allowing him to accelerate because it's meant to limit the inputs on corners. So
that obviously affected his start, right?
Which affects going at the start, going down all the straights, and then also in the corners. On some of the corners,
he had more throttle.
He had more throttle than you want. So that's a total electronic problem. So blaming him for a bad race, I think, is folly, and that's why he pulled in. In terms of Ducati,
look, I understand your point. I get it.
Mick, you gotta let someone else have a go, brother.
But how can you?
I understand the point. I've just never ever, and I've said this all the time, I just don't think Miller has what it takes to be at that.
That's not what we're talking about at the moment.
I never think he should have ever been given the factory ride, and I still don't think he's going to last.
Dude, we're not talking about this. So that's my first point. My second point is, yes, all the GP22s seem to have a slight, they're not set up as well as you would expect. And going on Enea is riding the perfect Ducati, should be championship winning bike from last year. That thing's set up. There is setups for every track in the system ready for them to go. That's what they've bought, right? So in terms of the perfect bike, he still has the perfect bike. What Ducati was saying when they developed the new bike was, they said, we can't develop this bike anymore. Like, there's nowhere else for us to go. So we're going to develop a bike and try and tune it up in the first couple of races, but then give us a higher ceiling that we need for the end of the year development and going into other seasons. Because this bike is really a revolution, just like Honda's is, and even to an extent Suzuki's is. So that's why we're seeing, I mean, Enea is an amazing rider as well, so we can't take that away from him. Like, if you saw, but if you saw like Marini and Bezzecchi was faster of the two as well on last year's bike. So that GP21 is the better of the two bikes at the moment. What you were saying about Bastianini getting a ride next year, I think Zarco, if he stays on this trajectory, is gone. So there's definitely going to be a seat on the on one GP22 or whatever next year. But I think that's because he's been on a downward trajectory worse than any other Ducati rider from the middle of last year.
I tell you though, I don't understand. Like, I understand what you're saying about Ducati saying, you know, the 21 is a better is the perfect bike. I don't understand it at the same time, because you're talking about a manufacturer who has literally got eight bikes on the grid. So
but there's only 5 new ones.
I understand that, but for me, that's all the more reason to have refined your package before. I mean, there's no excuse. We had 2 full tests this year. Yes, there's
Give them a
always going to
few
be scope
races.
for there's always going to be scope for adjusting, but you have they had 4 sorry, excuse me, they had 5 bikes worth of data to go from to refine this
But
package.
if they're
Okay,
building
yes,
a
we're
totally
only
new bike, they're just going to get more data from more bikes at every
no,
race.
but I don't buy that, because at the same time
But you have to
look
buy it.
at-
That's just
no,
logic.
No, I don't, because you have 8 bikes. You can
Go
refine
H.
your package and make it competitive.
Yeah,
It's
but
not an
is it-
excuse.
Is it like Formula One where the developments take a while? Like it doesn't happen straight
Yeah,
away. Like it's going to
obviously.
take a few.
Yeah, that's definitely part of the consideration. But the counter argument could be made if you wanted to be just argumentative, that Ducati have brought a new bike this year with five riders providing data. Honda have brought a new bike with 4 riders
bikes.
bringing data, and that bike was a lot more competitive from
Are
the
LCR
beginning
running
at a
22
track.
packages though?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Mick,
Interesting.
to answer your question, something that is, I think, going to be a very big talking point, and I actually feel sorry for Jack Miller in this regard, because he did nothing wrong today at all, but just purely based on based on the performance of Bastianini and even Martin before he got wiped out. There's already pressure on his seat, and he did nothing wrong. He didn't even really get a chance to punch back, and that's just the nature of the
Can we
beast
also
right
say
now.
that he actually qualified better than
Yeah, I understand.
old mate as well.
I
no
get
one's
that,
ever
but-
disputed Miller being good in one lap time. Miller's biggest flaw is his end of the race. He struggles to close out races. He'll tease us with a great finish every now and then. I think back to 2 years ago at Valencia, where he was in a back and forth tussle with Morbidelli and everyone, and which I think gave him the factory seat. And then last year he was ordinary. Last year he was on this best package that Ducati have allegedly produced since being back in MotoGP, and the best he could do was what? Finish 4th or 5th in the World Championship? Please, come on.
We're not
You
arguing
really
that, but
have
the point-
so much hate for him, don't
the
you?
point
I
was
don't have
trying-
hate. I just think that we sit here on this Miller hype train like he's
No,
like
we're
the
not
next
hyping him.
revelation of bloody Mick Dillon, and he's not, and he never will
He's-
be.
Listen, I think that he's definitely already on a hot seat. That's fact, because the
I
other
think he was
two
on a hot
guys are
seat last
performing so
year.
well. He was, and it's even hotter now. That's just the reality of it. The interesting thing is going to be with Bastianini and with Martin. These guys are definitely part of Ducati's future, but with all the conversation, particularly at the end of last year and moving into this year, with Ducati courting Quartararo as well, it's going to be interesting how that all plays out. I think Miller's gone. I could
Where
very
does-
easily.
Where does Pecco fit in all this too?
Pecco's
I
number
think
one.
Pecco's
He's going to be the
Pecco-
number one rider this year.
I think that you're going to see a Pecco, Bastianini factory ride. I think Martin and potentially Marini. Will
You don't
be
think they
on
could
Pramac
put
next year.
Bastianini
Are
on a
you- are you-
Pramac and then put Quartararo on the Lenovo bike?
I mean, you could. I think you've also got to think about whether Mir signs with Suzuki. I think that's
He's
hanging
coming
the
to
balance.
Honda.
If
He's
Mir,
coming to Honda.
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. 'cause
Yeah,
Mir-
he's coming to
I don't-
Honda.
No, I'll tell you why not. Because you're sitting there saying, "Oh, he's going to Honda," like the gentleman with the nice mic was saying for all through the off season. Oh, he's going to Honda. It's a done deal. Firstly, none of Mir's reps or Honda. Actually, Honda came out 2 weeks ago and said it's highly disrespectful and untrue that you're making these rumors. So I don't know where this even came from.
You are
Or
the
whatever.
most biased
Whatever.
fucking commentator
Whatever.
I've ever heard in my life.
Mir was courted by Suzuki all through Moto3. He has a lot of affiliation with that with the factory. He came out and said last year he wants more pace. They've delivered on the pace. They've still, it looks like, kept their classic handling. I think Mir won't make a decision till round 4, 5, or 6.
Can we stick to
regardless
this
of whether
race? Can we stop speculating on the end of the
where he
year?
goes, regardless of where he goes, I think it's very juicy to have a look at Honda, because Honda have clearly redone their bike in every sense. You've got a bike that, if you look at last year's bike, Pole could not do anything on it. It was a complete Márquez model. Márquez seems pretty comfortable on the new bike, but Pole looked fantastic. And yes, Anthony said before that they've got the wrong tire choice. Okay, maybe they did, but at the same time, if he was on softs for so long, why wasn't he pulling away more than he did? Like, he pulled away at one point for about 3 or 4 laps, and then he was reeled in really quickly by Enea. So, okay, you're on softs. You led for the whole race. Pull away more. Do a Lorenzo. Put your foot down and make yourself uncatchable. So, I was a little bit disappointed. Yes, he was fantastic, whatever, but he didn't win. So I'm a little bit disappointed in pole, because I thought if he was ever going to win a race, that was his chance.
He should have won from pole.
He could have, but Enea is I think we're really going to see the birth of a new star. This guy knows how to save his tires. He's on a
Suzuki should be pulling for him, Mickey. Suzuki should really.
You know what? And I wouldn't complain. And that's another thing. Everyone's talking about Mir and where he's going to re-sign. I mean, you've got another bloke on the other side of the garage, you know, that on his day can beat anyone. You know, if they do put all their eggs in one basket on Mir, you know, where could Rins potentially sign? I think could you imagine this? Imagine Rins on a factory Ducati. Imagine Rins on a factory Ducati.
This is supposed to be the LaSalle review.
We stop fucking imagining these end of the year situations and talk about the damn race.
The gentleman with the nice mic is.
No, because this isn't the end of the year, guys. I mean, everyone knows that MotoGP factories make these decisions.
I'm going to put this
halfway
back on
through
track.
the
I want
season.
to bring this back on track because
Before you do, Joe, before you do.
race one.
Joe, before you do.
Here's what everyone should take away from this. Dude, you should have joined us in the off season and got this shit off your
He's
chest.
got so much stuff to say.
The gentleman with the nice mic has a point.
I sat there through all the bullshit last year.
No, you didn't.
All the garbage tossed my way. All the pontificating about how Suzuki fell off a cliff and all these other teams that allegedly were so good. I think this is going to be the tightest. I think this is going to be the tightest year in MotoGP that we've seen for a long time. Like I said, I think there is a dearth of quality in the paddock, and I can't wait. I think race one was just an appetizer. Get ready for a great season, boys.
Are you excited?
Listen,
Get ready for a great season.
track. So what I saw in the race that I think everyone can attest to is number one.
Keep it short, Joe.
Yeah, number one, every team except Yamaha had positives in that race.
Yeah,
we saw Suzuki had good pace, didn't really have the race pace that I thought they would, but it was close enough that I thought, they're definitely in the ballpark. Honda had both their bikes in the top six, which I did not expect at all. I do believe that they have brought the best starting package of all the teams, like in terms of that bike is a revolution and it's already fast. So it's surprising, and I'm also happy to see them there. And Enea just showed us what he showed us last year. At the end of the year, he's probably talent that we all want him to be. But like in terms of Yamaha, Ducati had like pace in practice, they had pace in qualifying. They killed themselves in the race. Yeah, like I'm not worried about any of the teams except Yamaha, because Yamaha have not shown anything since the start of testing. And then I thought we'll come here and we'll see if they have been sandbagging, but I did not expect to see 9th and 12th or 9th and 11th. But then also their satellite bikes, especially dude, they got nothing at the moment. And considering that they were first there 2 races last year, you would expect that bike is an evolution. So they would have run sort of similar setups to what they had last year that they had success in. If that's what they were doing, everyone has blown by them. Everyone.
Yeah, they definitely look like they're at the back of the pack. I still cannot believe they haven't worked on horsepower. And one thing I will say, how on earth have Suzuki not how have they not thought about pushing for that satellite team again? Like, I think now that they've got a new team director, that has to be their priority. I mean, clearly with the smallest budget, arguably in the World Championship, they've just produced another bike which I think can compete. They have to go for a satellite team. Surely this is the year.
Who do you reckon, Mick? What team? VR46?
No,
I think that was an option before they signed their deal with Ducati. And I think now they've signed their life away, which is not a bad thing. I think Ducati's fantastic, but surely they have to go for a satellite team soon.
Go H before Michael starts again.
Look, I'm loving the passion from our MotoGP correspondent, but as an Australian podcast, it would be remiss of us to discuss Remy Gardner's first race in MotoGP. So what do you guys think?
And I was expecting Michael to monologue about this for flaming 20 minutes. I think he did nothing wrong. He plotted around.
Nothing right. Yeah.
I mean, realistically, all he has to do for the first half of the year is not crash, because for him, staying on the track is the best learning he can get. He has to learn this bike. He has to learn how to ride these tracks on this new bike. I mean, his teammate crashed. Oliveira, again, crashed. So for him, stay on the bike, learn, get some data, get some confidence. I mean, there's nothing really more he's expected of him. He's in a satellite team. Any good result is going to be highlighted. Any result like this is not going to be mentioned because there's nothing to mention. I mean, he finished ahead of Darren Binder. I mean, I don't know what that
he
says.
is coming off a massive injury.
Yeah, and that's right. He's got his wrist injury, which is a bug of an injury for any motorbike rider.
He was the only true rookie that finished the race, didn't he? Or Binder finished the race too, but Bezzecchi crashed, Fernandez crashed.
DG Antonio, what is that? Antonio crashed.
He finished the race.
Did he?
I'm pretty sure.
No, I don't think he finished. I don't think he finished.
I think Gardner. I think what you'll see, what Joseph was saying, is true. I think let him heal, okay, because we know that, historically riders are pretty poor when they're carrying injuries. I think let him heal. Wait for the tracks where KTM have, over the last 3 or 4 seasons performed well at. I think it's not unrealistic to consider if he was to outperform Oliveira, he could be on the factory KTM before, sooner rather than later. So let's just see how he goes. But I don't think 14th is a bad finish for your first race. Tricky track too.
Especially when the world champion was 12th.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
So, and like I said, I think this year out of any other year, maybe in the last 3 or 4 seasons, it's going to be, I think the swings from race to race are going to be more drastic. I don't think it's unrealistic for a race winner, one week to be, at the bottom end of the top 10 or just outside the top 10 the week later. Because like I said, the top 12 riders, I think are just so close.
So to finish the pod, let's have the way too early championship prediction. Mick.
Oh look, that's too hard for me right now.
You've had an opinion about everything else.
Hot take, mate. Hot take.
I honestly just think that LaSalle is so different to any other track in the season. I want to see.
I'm not holding it to you like gospel. Just throw me something.
Look, to me,
Joe.
Simply because I think the 22 Ducati right now isn't where it needs to be. I'm going to say it's going to be at between Suzuki or Honda.
No, rider. I don't care about constructors. Give me the champion, rider world champion. Joseph, come on.
Me.
Okay.
I would love to say
one word.
I've got a sentence. I would love to say Pecco, but in terms of what I saw this week, I'm going to say my way too early prediction is Márquez.
I agree. Hey,
and that hurts me to say that, to be honest.
I was going to say Márquez.
Yeah.
But can I just say quickly, we saw.
I don't think that's unrealistic.
We saw 6 bikes within like 6 seconds in that race. I mean, this is a track that we've seen runaway races recently. We've seen Yamaha's dominate. We saw Aleix on the Aprilia running away from Márquez.
If there's any track this year where you're going to have larger gaps between the finishes, I think it's LaSalle. So I cannot wait to see what it's like at a track where historically the ends to the race are closer. So even though I think Márquez would be my other option, because Márquez is just incredibly consistent.
We need to put a pin in it for the next MotoGP conversation, but we need to talk about Maverick Vinales in our next MotoGP conversation, because I think we might see the end of Maverick Vinales as we knew it.
Maybe as a factory rider.
Yeah, let's leave that for another time. Any closing remarks, lads? Any questions? Hey, did you have a question?
No, but I did have an observation, if you will. LaSalle, it is a much better MotoGP track than it is a Formula One track, and I'm glad that we're not going back there again, and that they're doing a purpose-built track for Formula One.
That is a MotoGP track.
I don't even like LaSalle. If I'm being completely honest, I think it's a boring track.
I love it as a MotoGP. It's a great MotoGP track.
It's just a Ducati speedway.
No, it's not
I don't,
anymore.
I don't find it. I don't
Dude,
find
LaSalle has enough corners.
Didn't Yamaha win there last year?
Yeah, 2.
they did purely because their spec last year was so good. Yamaha worked so hard on their cornering the year before they came. Their bike was untouchable on corner focused tracks. They blitzed Suzuki last year in corner based tracks. I mean,
Can I ask you a question as well, just quickly, just
Go on,
before we
ask.
finish?
Yeah.
Why are you so were you so shocked with how Maverick performed this week, especially?
Because I don't know. I've probably been one of the biggest proponents of Maverick Vinales' like career, like saying how amazing. he is
Yeah, I know, I understand
since
that.
Moto 3, and I've always loved Top Gun. So I always want him to do.
Like that's relevant.
No, that's his nickname. I always want him to
Yeah,
do well.
I know that.
And I kind of, even the start of his Suzuki career was, I thought was phenomenal. He did really well with a much more limited package than they are now. And then when he moved to Yamaha, straight away, he kind of just lit the world on fire, won 4 races,
On the
to
bounce.
start the season. And I'm kind of like, yeah, this is the Maverick Vinales that we all know and love. And, he's fantastic. Since then, there hasn't been a whole lot to talk about. And if I'm being honest, regardless of, my personal feelings towards him, he is not worthy of a factory seat. And
He was just behind Quartararo.
Last year, I'll be honest with you, I don't care how he's performing in relation to a struggling Yamaha. I care about how he's performing in relation to Aleix Espargaró. Now, Aleix is phenomenal. He's aging. He's not the future of Aprilia. So if you're bringing in a young rider who had 5 or 6 races plus an off season to get used to the bike, and he's coming in and he's, lapping in 12ths, and his teammate is racing for a podium position, then that's an issue with me.
I don't disagree with you.
I've
I
been
just
saying
think
that-
that
Considering he's
races.
won at LaSalle, considering he's won at that track.
To be honest, Anthony, I've been saying this since he left Suzuki. He had.
What, when he
He
won 4
started
races on the bounce?
he
Come
was
on, man.
amazing.
Yeah, exactly. He
first
was
season at
he was
Yamaha.
amazing
You're
for
an-
his
you're
first
an
2
oracle.
races of his career and was junk the rest of the year. And he stayed at Yamaha way too long, and he's had a shit attitude since he thought he was king shit at the end of his Suzuki career. He left way too early. He got way too cocky, and I think he deserves everything that comes his way because he's always been a prick, and he was a prick last year at Yamaha, and he deserves it. I don't have any remorse for.
It's going to be called the
Maverick. I think he's a shit.
Unfiltered Michael
Yeah.
podcast.
You
If
have
we-
a lot of pent up frustration tonight, Mikey.
There is no Suzuki bias in this podcast whatsoever, is there?
I
Bloody
honestly,
hell.
nah, there isn't. I'm objective with everything that I say, but the amount of absolute BS that was thrown my way when I said last
We've
year.
said this 4 times this one
year,
pod.
Can we call this podcast?
And Joseph wants to act like
Team Yellow,
I
please?
called it in the off season. Yeah, of course you did. Because
Harry,
every commentator on
what
MotoGP
I
was saying,
what I wanted to tell you
Please.
before was when I woke
Please.
up on Saturday morning after practice, I had
His messages.
a Facebook rant on our chat that was about 4 pages long about
I know.
the most
And Michael
anti-Ducati.
He just
most
talks to
pent-up
himself
hate.
through Messenger.
it wasn't anti-Ducati. It
I
wasn't
just commented.
anti-Ducati.
I just wrote "LOL" this guy because he's never in the chat, never comments, and then all of a sudden I wake up to about 50 messages.
He asks himself a question. It's like his monologues. He asks the question, then he answers the question, then he gets
Look,
upset.
I'm a
he gets
philosopher.
angry, and
I'm
he
a
gets-
philosopher.
You're
Okay,
not,
I'm a
bro.
philosopher of the
You're
sport.
crazy, bro.
I'm a philosopher, boys. I
You're
sit here, I
crazy.
contemplate.
I
I sit
think
here,
today.
I listen, I contemplate.
I think tonight's episode is going to be called Michael's pontification.
Oh my gosh, too much.
Most thing
I've
about
enjoyed.
him-
I've enjoyed being back. I've
he
enjoyed
was
being back.
he was
Let's just say
listening to us
that.
talk about supercars, just thinking about every comment, every point he was gonna make. Going,
Like, he
I'm
did not
gonna
look at-
get these
I
guys.
He
actually
did not
considered.
look at the
I actually
screen
considered
once.
going. I considered going back through every pod that we spoke about MotoGP last year and snipping all of the
But Mick,
comments that were made.
you can't harbor this ill will because the fact is Suzuki made a gain in the off season. So
Look,
what
it's
will
not
we
about
see?
Suzuki.
What-
It's not about
what will-
Suzuki.
No,
For
it is.
me,
It definitely is because
It's not. It's
you're
really
harboring
not.
some ill will.
It's
They
not.
have made a gain in the off season based on
Look, arguably they
the
made this
negative
game
things we will
in preseason testing last year when they
No,
were
they
talking about
didn't.
the 22 bike.
Last year's results were not good enough for us to go, oh, Suzuki's going to be next year's champions. Fuck, we had last year's championship to worry about last
No,
year.
because your whole argument just fell on itself because
How?
you sit there saying it wasn't good enough. Of course it wasn't good enough, but every other manufacturer did what they've done to Suzuki this year and they've improved and Suzuki didn't. But they were
Harry,
preparing for the 22 bike the year before and I called it
cue
many
exit
times.
music.
You all shit on me. You shit on me every time. And now when Suzuki have a bike that matches the Ducati for speed, everyone's sitting there going, oh, this is unbelievable. This is a revelation.
I'm going to put
Please.
a violin
called
whenever
this.
Michael's going on his rants in the background.
I said at the start of my explanation tonight, I think it's going to be a 3-horse race. I think it's going to be the tightest year we've ever seen. This is why we love MotoGP. Welcome to 2022, boys.
And with that, we will leave it there. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your patience tonight, guys. It was a long episode. It was a long MotoGP segment of the episode too. So please, thanks so much. It's going to get bigger and better than what it was tonight. So please keep sharing the socials, keep liking, subscribing, spreading the word, and we'll see you next week for a interview episode with Nathan Hearn of the Racing Line podcast. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great night.
Cheers. Thanks, mate.
Oh, it was a roller coaster.